welcome. Thanks for joining this, Simon. Really appreciate it. And I think before we go any further, we've got to give a bit of an explanation as to who you are, your background, the reason why you're on this video, and hopefully a few more, is because we've got the community hub that we're launching very shortly. And we've asked you if you'll be get involved as an industry ambassador. And I know you're super busy, so any time that you give to us, we're going to be hugely appreciative of that. But that's the remit of us having these videos and you being involved with us. We've also got the verification service, which we'll talk about probably on another video, or I think we might touch on it on this one. But I guess I almost need to hand it to you and say, what's your background? How did you get into SAM and ITAM? What you're doing at KPMG? And then we'll go from there. We've got a few questions that we'll cover off in this session.
No problems. Well, thank you for having me on. And I love this initiative and what you're sort of doing here for the community. So big thumbs up.
Thank you.
And also, yeah, it's a colourful background.
It is, isn't it? I know you've got a few. But I think that's
I have got
one of the best.
But I like the ad of the Abstrato background as well. So kudos there.
Thank you.
Background. Well, so I've been in software asset management for about 20 years, unbelievably at this point. Actually, it's about 18. And I suppose, how did I get into this? It wasn't the career that I sort of came planning to do, right? I think like almost every licensed practitioner, it's sort of something that came to me.
Yeah.
So I started out as I left university wanting a job that was really varied. And my view at the point of time was, well, if I join one of the big four practices, then I'll get exposure to loads of things, which is exactly what I did. So I started off really briefly with a couple of years at Deloitte, and then I quite quickly moved to KPMG, relocated to London.
I forgot that. I forgot.
Yeah, no, small tenure. So back in my Deloitte days, I was doing enterprise risk management, which was all to do with, at that point in time, things like journal entry testing and who had permission to systems and what they were allowed to do. So it's not really SAM, but you can see the sort of entry point for me was user access rights and sort of privileges. So I did that for a while. Then I joined KPMG. I've been there ever since, or here ever since. And I joined the IBM software compliance program. So I really cut my teeth as an IBM auditor. Did that for about 6 or 7 years.
And that was hectic, wasn't it?
Madness in terms of sort of the way we work and how much we were doing at that point. We're still very busy with that. But I moved through that quite quickly and got to a point where I was running the UK portfolio of IBM software audits. Diversified, I did Attachmate, I did TIBCO. And then diversified further and got into sort of the advisory side rather than the compliance side. And I spent the last 10 years really being a software asset management consultant and done things with Flexera, Microsoft, Oracle, and just grown and grown really. But a strange entry.
I'm gonna just for the record, I'm sure I've said this before, but if I haven't, I'm going to let everyone know that I've been doing SAM and ITAM for about 20 or 25, maybe close to 30 years, embarrassingly. And I think you're probably one of the strongest consultants and people in the industry that I've met.
Thank you.
We did a bit of work together. And I remember thinking, my God, I thought I knew a few people that could do stuff. This guy is. So for anyone that's watching this, if you've got licensing work that you need doing and it's complex and detailed and you need someone that can put their head in the weeds, Simon is that person. You're probably one of the very few people.
You're gonna make me blush now.
No, but seriously, you are probably one of the very few people that can put their head right in the licensing weeds and enjoy it, where I'm kind of squirming and a little bit embarrassed that I can't do it. And then you can put your head above the weeds, look at the bigger picture and where your practice needs to go. And now, Simon hasn't paid me to say that, viewers or listeners. That's a genuine. Simon is probably one of the best globally at what he does. So I just thought you were introducing yourself, you were introing yourself, you were running through a few things, and in the back of my head, it's like, well, that's quite high level. This guy needs to really actually let people know how good he is. So I've done it for you. Okay, good intro. I always feel so. I've had some proximity to KPMG. When I was at the Federation Against Software Theft, I nearly went to work when David Eastwood was heading it up. You and I had some work together a few years ago. So I feel like I know you guys. And one thing that I tend to feel quite frustrated with is when the market looks at the big four and says, "Oh, they're just auditors.
Mm.
They just do compliance." And from my own personal experience, I know you don't. I know you do much more than that. Do you? Is there? Can you? I know you can't talk into too much detail around every project you do, but can you cover off that kind of urban myth? Because I think it's time
Yeah.
that it's kind of put to bed.
I
If that's the
don't think
right
it'll ever get
term.
put to bed. It's just an optic that we live with. But
Yeah.
I mean, you're exactly right. As a KPMG offering, we were born out of audit, and you'll see a lot of stuff in the marketplace about who audits on which publisher and how to sort of address sort of your audit footing, and that's fine. I mean, we are known as particularly IBM software auditors, but that really goes back to a mid 2000s type
Yeah.
of industry, and it's changed a lot in
Dated.
15, 20 years. It is dated, but partly from the perspective that the publishers have changed a lot as well. So
Yeah.
just to take the IBM point head on, we obviously have the audit program that we support. We have an IBM sort of endorsed SAM program as well, which is completely separate and leverages the learnings we've got from having done
Yeah.
20 years with IBM. And
Which is very positive, right?
I think it's
That,
positive. It's positive from IBM. It's positive for us. I think
yeah.
there are sort of detractors and advocates for it in the sort of industry, but it is something different, and it is, I think, valuable for customers who want to go down that path. The point I would make with it though is if you're looking for a SAM partner, often there are industry experts that have had a lot of experience and exposure to end user side perspectives. I think what makes KPMG different is we have that publisher side perspective as well.
Yep.
And I don't
Yep.
necessarily view that as a bad thing, because if you want to be compliant, then surely a partner that understands how the publisher manages compliance and what their expectations are is an advantage.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think KPMG SAM services are differentiated,
Yeah.
because we're not scared to say that we have that direct understanding of how the publishers operate, as well as the advisory services that we built out. They are pretty much mutually exclusive, right? If I'm advising an end user, then they're the customer, and the knowledge we've accumulated is what we bring, but
Yeah.
we're not reporting back to a publisher,
No.
and that segregation is really strong.
Yeah.
I guess to your question of that urban myth, then, I mean, take us as a global practice. We're about 300 consultants. We're delivering managed services, we're delivering tools implementation, we're delivering compliance reporting almost as burning platforms. So it's a full gambit of capabilities. And it's across at least the sort of top 20 publishers in the world today, probably much deeper and wider if you get into the sort of point projects that come through as well.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just not true. Like, the audit bit of our business is a part of the business,
Yeah.
but the SAM advisory part is probably equal or bigger depending on which particular country you look at.
Do you know? So the thing that I always get drawn into is when we're working, or when Abstratos work with an organization directly, our first point is, for the future, you really need to understand the process with which you go through to get to a result that's accepted by the publisher.
Yeah.
And then if you can share, and we'll probably save the whole verification services for another
Yeah.
video, but the whole idea is, if you've got an organization such as KPMG that understands the audit methodology, understands the results and how that needs to be represented and provided back to a publisher, it's like the drop the mic moment. It's the
Yeah.
ultimate. And if you can document that, talk about it, and share that with a publisher and be proactive about it, it's kind of like you don't even need audit defense services. it's all negated by
Well, you
having
should be in
that.
audit defense, right? I mean, in an ideal world, everything would be
Exactly.
working the way we envisage. But
Yeah.
I think IT is pretty ephemeral. Things change quite rapidly, and it's
Yeah.
hard to stay on top of. But no, I agree with your point.
Um, Gartner, I know, I know is important to you, and you've put so much when we were working together, you put a lot of time and effort into Gartner. And if we look at the whole managed service space, and this correlates and links to the last question. Yeah, you guys don't just do audit, you do managed services. And if you look at Gartner over the past few years, and I've got my own personal views on the scorings, and I've made that public. I'm not going to draw it into this one, but you're progressing with Gartner, which is a good thing, right? And
Yeah,
I think you're quite
massively.
happy with some of the results that you've seen and the
Yeah.
narrative that the industry is seeing KPMG go through.
No, I agree. I mean, maybe the context for your viewers is that when it comes to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, I'm the person at the moment in KPMG that coordinates that, and I've done it for the last
Mm,
3 years, 4 years now. So we entered the quadrant right at its inception. We were categorized as a niche provider. That quite quickly changed, and we moved into the challenger space. This year, quadrant came out last month, and we are now squarely at the top of the challenger quadrant. There are reasons why we don't necessarily conform to Gartner's leader space, and I think some of that has to do with the way we approach technology and hosting and what the overall sort
yeah,
of proposition we have is. But we have what I would say is quite a specific model that we bring when we deliver a SAM managed service. So that doesn't always tick off Gartner's sort of particular design expectations.
yeah,
But the notable thing was this year we moved really high up on the ability to execute access. So I think that puts us third within the quadrant on that particular
good.
parameter. And actually, it's neck and neck. I mean, it's really tight
Yeah.
across the sort of top end of that measurement. But the practice is evolving. Gartner's quadrant is evolving. They introduce new things, and you find that every year it sort of moves up and across. And it's really good that we keep pace with that and actually move forwards within that design as well.
Yeah. It's so we've both been in the industry for a long time. The thing that really excites me about the industry right now is there's just so many moving parts. Typically we've looked at enterprise, and of course your background is working with enterprise organizations globally, but we've got the small to medium sector just literally exploding because of SaaS applications and cloud first organizations that have been incorporated over the last 3 or 4 years post COVID. So I know that Gartner's going to have to try and look and understand how it adopts its managed service space for that. And again, another video for another time, but I really believe the whole SAM, ITAM, FinOps sector is going to amalgamate, and the services and the outputs that we see over the coming years, I think they'll be completely different to what we've seen over the last 5, 6 years, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings me on to last question for you.
Okay.
We've got 15, 20 minutes. We're actually okay for time at the moment. I know you've got a hard stop at 10 o'clock, but what does the future look like for Simon and the ITAM practice in KPMG? Can you talk us through anything that you've got coming up that you think is quite interesting? Well, everything's interesting for ITAM and SAM for you and me, but is there anything for the viewers or listeners that you kind of say, okay, yeah, we've got, we're involved in this, or any special thoughts that you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'll just talk about what I think is resonating and where we
Yeah,
are in terms of communications. So
right.
the last 12, 18 months for me, we've modernized how we are describing the services, I think, more than anything.
Okay.
So one of the problems I encounter is the word SAM is a bit of a catch-all, and
Yeah,
99% of organizations really mean software license management. So
yeah,
if you think of SAM being cradle to grave and how you acquire and how you deploy and how you patch and monitor and all those things, that isn't what I think most people that say they do SAM actually do. They maybe have a bit of a tangential overlap, but I think most people, when they say SAM, they mean that they're doing license compliance and they're trying to reduce cost or contain cost, and they're obviously managing inbound audits and all those sort of things. What's happening though is software publishers are going through a huge transition for themselves in terms of their license portfolios.
Yeah.
So we're seeing shifts in sort of metrics and adoption of cloud infrastructure and changes to how licenses work on-prem versus on cloud. So we don't just talk about SAM, and we don't just talk about software license management. We talk about software license modernization. And that modernization topic, that is what people are really grappling with. And I think it's probably been at the sort of center of the whole sort of IT asset management, software asset management domain for its duration. But if you take, and again, I'll drop on the IBM one, but IBM introduced Cloud Paks about 3-4 years ago. What they did with Cloud Paks was they effectively made their standalone products part of mini bundles. So you look at something like IBM Cloud Pak for automation, they put a whole bunch of things like FileNet inside that, so it becomes a mini suite. But what they also did was they made it ready for OpenShift containers, so customers that buy that product can deploy natively to the cloud.
Yeah.
And now you see that you've got customers that are still on the heritage standalone products, managing them under that Cloud Pak designation, trying to put them onto that OpenShift technology and running the whole transformation process. And at the same time, that's happening in an IT landscape where your SAM practitioner, your software license manager, is being asked to effectively control two different buckets of things. And you do that across every publisher. I mean, simple things, but Microsoft introducing Azure hybrid benefits, right? Again, you know, you've got to do on-prem and cloud. You look at the acquisitions and how maybe Broadcom is shifting their VMware licenses from perpetual to subscription. And that license modernization challenge, that's about being future ready. And it's nearly always the centerpiece of the conversations we're having with customers. So that's where the practice is. We're trying to think less about old world compliance reporting and think more about future world. How does your IT landscape, your infrastructure, your licensing actually work with these publisher changes coming through?
Do you know, that's such a good one.
I know, it's mad, right? It's hard.
It is. And from our own perspective at Strato, when we kind of backed away from doing the managed services and we've got the platform for freelancers, and that's very much, we've hung our coat on. There's old world and there's new world, to coin your term, the modernization piece. And we've just kind of gone, I feel sometimes like we've gone straight ahead into 5 years, because people look at what we're doing and they're like, okay, well, that's an interesting way to manage applications and licensing. And we're kind of like, well, it's coming.
It's going to happen. It's happening.
But I sometimes feel like we're a bit too early in what we're doing, but actually slowly there's some traction happening with it. Yeah. And I'm really confident over the coming weeks and months and years, it's going to grow and grow. But what you've just talked about there, I think is a super, super interesting one, because if you are a SAM or ITAM manager and you are responsible for that, if you turn around to the executive and say, look, you've got old world and you've got new world, and the two are running together and there's loads of transformation, it's a bit crazy. I'm just going to take my foot off the gas with the old world and I'm just going to focus on new world. All right. Yeah. No, because you can't do that. You've got to run both at the same time. And that's taking two sets of skills, two sets of more operating models, and then trying to transition them and make sure that you can keep all of the same.
But this is the convergence. Results. When you say ITAM and FinOps, that's exactly the sort of inflection point we're at. It has to work together, because if it doesn't, you get silos, you get mistakes, you get omissions, and then you're non-compliant and you've wasted a whole bunch of money.
I got to tell you this. I won't give you the person's name because, well, actually, it doesn't look negative on him. It's very positive. Obviously, we've got the community hub where we're, one of the gambits is we're looking to bring the FinOps community and the ITAM community together to talk and share ideas and collaborate in a real-time environment. Done a lot of videos with FinOps specialists, at the top. And one of them came back to me a few days ago and said, this ITAM thing, can you tell me more about it? I want to learn more about it. And I was like, this is fantastic. This is what we need. Someone that's in the new world of what we do, looking back, because the two have to be symbiotic. You can't just do one. both of them have to be done together. So the
Yeah.
mutual understanding.
You're going to have to compare a panel, get a few of us together.
We should.
That's the next step. Yeah.
That's
I'm up
a
for
good
that.
idea. I'm going to take that idea and have that as a video. I'll use it as my own. Thank you, Simon.
No problems.
Listen, I know you've got a hard stop, and your hard stops really do mean hard stops. Mine are, I can talk for a minute or two and I'm all right, but I know that you've definitely got to go. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
Very welcome. Thank you.
I'm hoping that we can do a few more. And yeah, until the next time, I guess.
Yeah, I'll say
thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.